Welcome back to What It's Really Like to Be an Entrepreneur. I'm Vincent Lanci, speaker and author of the book Left for Dead, A Story of Redemption. Want to know what it's really like to be an entrepreneur? Well, you came to the right place. Whether you're already an entrepreneur, are looking to start your journey tomorrow, or someone looking for a little extra motivation to get through the day, this is the perfect podcast for you. This is the place where we will learn exactly what it's like in the world of entrepreneurship and hear real life, authentic stories of entrepreneurs grinding on each episode. My goal for this podcast series is to help you realize that giving up is never an option. If you missed last week's episode, be sure to download after you finish tuning in today. My guest on the show this week is someone I actually met on LinkedIn. One of my goals for this show is to find you value-delivering guests for each and every episode. I utilized my network first, let them know what was going on, and then I used one of my next resources, which was LinkedIn. Remember, listeners, networking is a key to growing your business, whether it be a podcast or your own business. This is a fellow Tampa guy, and I'm excited to introduce my new friend, Alexander Abell.
Hey Vincent, thanks for having me on. How's it going?
It's going well. Thank you for joining my podcast, Alex, and it's great to see you. So why don't you share a little bit of your story and what you got going on today before we jump into the questions?
I'm kind of your typical entrepreneur turned entrepreneur, and I didn't even know entrepreneur was a thing until a number of months ago. But I've spent the last probably 10 or so years in corporate America, in digital marketing, analytics, a lot of roles like that. And before that, I kind of dipped my toes into the entrepreneurial water in college. I opened up three businesses. I realized during that time that I needed to learn a lot of skills. I was young and passionate, but not as no skills to back up my passion.
Yeah.
So I joined the workforce, and I always I always would have that same mentality in any of my roles where it was like, what can I build? How can I make this better? How can I optimize? Which works if you're I was a marketing optimization consultant was my first real gig. But eventually it just kind of got the best of me, and I decided I've got to venture out on my own. I need to build something that
Yeah.
I can call my own, and that's where I started Lunchpool. It's my company that I've got a small team. We're scrappy, young, upstart, and we have just been really making waves across Tampa Bay for now, and looking to go national at the end of 2020. But we're all about connecting. Like you said, networking is everything, and you hear kind of the cliche, your network is your net worth. But it's a cliche for a reason
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we've done a lot of research, and there's such a thing as social capital, and the more people that you know, like there's value to that. There's a network effect, and because I know you and I know what you're into and what you're doing, and we've made that true connection, and there's trust at the basis of it. If an opportunity arises that I'm like, oh man, Vincent, I need to talk to Vincent about this thing because he's got to
Absolutely.
get in on this. And that's the magic of networking. That's why a lot of times the people that are the most connected have the most opportunities.
I love the way you put that. That's a great way to put it. Now, Alexander, something I do on this show each week, each episode, is I share an entrepreneurial story that is sure to inspire our listeners. I really enjoy this part of the show because I get to learn so much more about success stories. And on this episode, I'm going to share a story of a very famous yet recent individual in Larry Page. When Larry Page was 22 years old, he began to become sleepless, scouring the internet over different links on the World Wide Web. From this point on, he began to network. As an entrepreneur, like we mentioned, networking is key. He linked up with a man named Sergey Brin, and they grew very close, where they collaborated ideas and began working on the multiple links page. All of a sudden, something clicked. He noticed that the different links page from which he downloaded now became the basis for an algorithm called PageRank. PageRank was next used to create the first search engine in Backrub. However, Page's vision wasn't complete, and there was still more work to do. The brand name of Backrub wasn't getting the retention or sticking the way he had hoped for. So in 1997, Page switched Backrub to Google and then started that change that disrupted the internet until present day. It's crazy how that is 12 years or so ago, because it does feel just like yesterday I heard of Google. But the idea of this search engine was accepted right away by society. The two had to spend all of their free time developing the site and making sure it would run efficiently. They actually thought about selling the site during the initial phases, but are glad they didn't, because the first version they had was hosted by a Stanford website. It was called actually google.stanford.edu. And, thank God they didn't sell it, because now, even though it operated over half of Stanford's bandwidth, which is why they had to get on their own thing, now it's got 1 billion URLs by the end of the millennium in 2000, and you know the rest about Google, man.
It's such an awesome story, and I don't know how many people know this, but Google's name comes from it's a number. It's got a Google, I think is how it's pronounced, but it is a number that's 1.0 times 10 to the 100th power.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so I think it might be the largest number. It's not a million, it's not a trillion, it's a Google. It's so fascinating to me because I remember I think I was in 10th or 11th grade, and one of my best friends he ended up being valedictorian of my class, but we were in the library. You have these assignments and things, and we're doing some kind of research, and I'm using web crawler. That was my go-to search engine. And he's like, "Oh no, man, you got to use Google." And I was like, "Google, let me check this out." And I brought it up, and it was, it's just the typical. It hasn't changed in 20 years.
No,
it's just a search bar with the title. And I was like, "This is so basic. Like, why would anybody want to use this?" And flash forward, now they're one of the tech giants of the world. So,
well, simplicity is key sometimes.
Exactly, but it's his story is a testament to what being in the right place at the right time and making a connection with the right person can really do for not only your career but your life.
Absolutely, man. Network, 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 guys. Everybody listening in, keep networking. These are another example of how networking is so key. So, Alexander, now we're going to get into the big five. Each week, my guest and I will go over these 5 questions to help our listeners learn what it's really like to be an entrepreneur. So, you ready? Number 1 on the big 5 is, when did you realize that you weren't happy with what you were doing or you just needed to change? We kind of touched on the corporate experience before, but where can you go from there?
Oh yeah. So I mean, I briefly touched on it earlier, but to get into the weeds, let's flashback. I don't want to I don't really care about giving away my age. I'm 34, but I was a scruffy young 21 or 22-year-old when I decided I was gonna start a new website called Dear Drunk Me. It was me and another guy came up with it. There was some other similar websites like Text from Last Night that had popped up, and so we started this. We're in college. You go out, and so either you or one of your friends has too much to drink, and the next day the idea was that you would jump on the website, write yourself a scornful letter, say, "Dear Drunk Me, I can't believe that you punched a hole in the wall. Our lease is coming up soon." And it really got a lot of exposure, and it was a lot of fun. But I had no idea what I was doing, and I really wasn't connected with my inner sense of purpose. And from there, I started doing bar events. We started producing concerts. One of my biggest ones was we had a couple of shows. We did Lil Jon and the East Side Boys. We had Perpetual Groove was one of the really big ones.
Yeah.
And then from there, I started a brick and mortar shop selling like local. It was basically a hippie head shop. And at the same time, I'm trying to graduate college and manage a multimedia company doing websites. So I was just, I was stretched so thin.
True entrepreneur, man.
Yeah, stretching myself thin without really thinking about, what is me? Like what makes me do the things that I want to do. And, I've had a lot of time to reflect and look back on it, but I burnt out. I burnt myself out early.
Yeah.
And not only, mentally, but also financially. Like I was funding all that with credit cards and had no idea how to monetize and hadn't even really thought about it. And so, besides the brick and mortar, but it turned into that scenario where the things that were bringing in money, like the multimedia company, fell to the wayside because the other stuff that wasn't was way more fun. And so I kind of turned into a funtrepreneur for a little while. and
Yeah.
Yeah, and finally I was like, okay, I'm done with all this. I sold one of the companies. The rest I got away from. And then I made it my mission to graduate because, I was going into year 8 of my 4-year degree.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so it just transitioned me into, I was like, I need to learn delegation. I need to learn, time management. I need to learn all these skills. And why do that on my own dime when I'm clearly struggling, when someone I can make a salary and learn on somebody else's payroll,
Yeah.
and it's that's how the corporate world works, is someone else takes the risk and you are learning and growing. So that's kind of how that transition happened. But I'll tell you, if you have some entrepreneurs out there and you catch the bug, usually it's, it runs in the family or you have a mentor at a young age. But once you get that entrepreneurial bug, it's really hard to work for other people, at least in the long term.
I agree. I put it like this a lot. If you're working for somebody else, there's less risk, of course. You're getting paid, but you're essentially making someone else's dream come true.
Yep.
And that's all fine. Everybody has different dreams. Some people, I talk about at the end of my book, some people want to work 30 years, get a pension, move on. Some people want to travel. Everybody wants different things. And for the both of us, we're working on kind of making this dream come true. And I think
Yep.
we're on our way. Just a lot of hard work that we've done and we have to continue to do. Great answer there. Number two, we talked about things that you're growing on, things you're teaching yourself. What are one or two of the most difficult parts you think of being an entrepreneur?
Oh man.
Just
I,
one or two. It's tough, I know.
yeah, I would say the hardest thing is conditioning yourself to be disciplined when you don't have to, especially coming from
Yeah,
coming
that's
from a
right.
corporate environment. You know that you become used to someone depending on you for certain things and outlining what those things are. So, for example, in my role in Jacksonville, I was working for a marketing firm, and it was awesome. I got to work for Verizon Wireless on their digital campaigns,
That's cool.
uh, Expedia, Bose. We had a list of clients, and I had a manager that would say, "This is what I need you to do. Here's when I need you to do it by," and that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
So it's really back then I was like, oh man, I got all this work to do. But now looking back, there's no comparison because now it's like, oh man, I have all this work to do, and I have to figure out which of it I'm not going to do because there's not enough time to do, and it's every day it's hustling. It's finding people to work with you, finding resources when you don't have all the things you need.
Yeah.
It's a lot. So I think that managing yourself and being able to prioritize and focus is one of the big challenges. And then the second one I would say is really figuring out. Um, it's a lesson that every entrepreneur needs to learn, that you can invest your time right now in building, and you're not going to have as much fun, but you're building something so that you can down the road in however many years it takes to really make it, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But you have to invest in that time because without it, you're just going to keep kind of floundering along. But there's many nights where, yes, I'd love to go to the movies, or I would like to, watch Netflix or go, play sports or whatever it may be. But sometimes you have to buckle down and actually do the work.
I
And
couldn't
then
agree with you more, man.
yeah, and then the third one. So I have a third one too.
All right.
Is
Bring it on. Bring it on.
the flip side of that. You know, a lot of entrepreneurs promote this hustler culture where you're just always on, burning the candles at both ends. But I really think that it's important to incorporate self care. So actually take those breaks. You have to really balance it in the right proportions. But these entrepreneurs and business people that just never stop, they're on a crash course for burnout. So it's really important to take care of yourself too.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, after my accident, I talk about it a lot. My mental health, I started to prioritize, and taking those little breaks sporadically can actually extend your day a lot longer than you just trying to go straight through. And I was at a point in college where I would not even burn out per se, but I went too fast and I crashed, and it's no good. But yeah, prioritizing your schedule is definitely very, very difficult. Especially, I have an Excel spreadsheet where I have like a calendar each day with my iCal, and then some things that I don't finish that day, it just starts building up, and then now which tasks do I choose to accomplish? So
Yeah.
absolutely a great answer. Question number 3, man. What is one of your greatest failures, and what did it teach you?
I have to go back to what I opened up with, which is the DDM for short. It was, I think the year was like 2011 or 2012, and I had a big show coming up. We did a homecoming, Valdosta State University, where I'm an alumni of,
Okay.
Valdosta, Georgia. We had a homecoming rave that we were putting on, and we ended up with like 300 people. It was amazing. It was out in the field, just glow sticks and
Awesome.
just craziness. But I remember I'm making a flyer for that event, and I go to the home or Office Depot to print out the flyer, and this lady sees the flyer, and we had a locally in Valdosta we had a big billboard that was like these like blue lips drinking a bottle of tequila that said "Dear Drunk Me" on it, and so like we were infamous around town. But this lady sees the flyer and she looks at me and she goes, "Ah, Dear Drunk Me, do you work for them? I can't believe a website like that even exists. It's disgusting." And in that moment I was like, well, I lied and I was like, "Oh no, it's just my friend. I'm picking these up for him." But that was the moment when I really, I felt like, what am I putting out into the world? Like, is this really the legacy that I'm trying to create? And over time I realized I was taking all of my insecurities and trying to build something around that. And that's the absolute wrong way to build your vision. Because, I'm an ambivert. I've become a lot more extroverted now. My business now is really about helping people connect and reach out to others for meaningful connections. But back then, it was almost the opposite. It was like I felt super awkward when I was at bars. I didn't know, what to talk about. So I would get drunk. That's what a lot of people do in college. Um, but instead of figuring out a meaningful way to solve that problem, I was like, oh, we'll just encourage blackout drinking and all this negative stuff. So, you know, we had a lot of fun, but it was a lot of very damaging and very distasteful fun. And so that's kind of when I hit rock bottom. Like you said, I was burning out. I didn't feel like I was connected really, to my soul with what I was doing. And that's when I kind of realized I have to make a change.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm pretty impressed by what I'm hearing so far, learning about your journey, the discipline that eventually kicks in for you. Now you allocate that time to your business. Over the last few years, I've worked real hard on disciplining myself and not caring what I'm missing and just sitting in the house and spending the time with family, simple life. And my goals have actually been reached now that have taken some time. Publishing my book was a 4-year process. Got that done, and now I had a lot of hiccups throughout the way. At the end of the book, I talk about it in the epilogue about why I was held up, but we'll touch on that later because I'm really enjoying your story right now. Here we are, number 4. I love this question. If you could choose to have a conversation and learn from any entrepreneur, dead or alive, who would that be?
Oh man, let's see. Uh, any entrepreneur, dead or alive, I would have to go with Richard Branson. And I use Richard Branson because that inaugural story, and a lot of these entrepreneurs have these crazy mythologies, and you never know what's real or what's not.
True.
But the backstory that I heard was that he needed a flight to the Virgin Islands, and either they didn't have one or it was all booked out. And him and a group of other people were really bummed out about it, and so he got them all together. They chartered a private jet to the Virgin Islands, and that's how Virgin Airlines started. So
Oh,
like
I never
that,
heard
yeah,
that.
that kind of resourcefulness and ability to not only solve a problem that you're experiencing, but a problem that other people are experiencing, and see a business opportunity in it as well is really something that I admire. And so, I would love to learn from him. And also, selfishly, if I could meet him, I could be like, hey, can you like get me in on Virgin Galactic? Because I'm really into space travel and I would love to, figure out how I can go to space one day.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I enjoy that question because there's so many possibilities for each unique individual I have in the show. Everybody's thinking 10 people, so who comes out is always awesome to hear. Last question for you. Where do you see yourself in your entrepreneurial endeavors in the future? We'll do 1 year and 5 years. Let's start with 1 year.
Sure. So 1 year from now, we've found really our kind of product market fit. Just a brief, overview of what we're doing. We have an app or an app-based platform really that we're launching in companies to begin with, and companies can use Lunchpool to help their employees, expand, make connections, and really get to know one another in an informal setting. So over the lunch break, over coffee however people connect, they can use their breaks to do it.
I love it.
So in a year, I hope to have expanded that B2B program, but then also launched our B2C program where anybody could download it. And so we're going to start with, really a targeted growth strategy for that. But my goal is that, by the end of the year, we'll start having support groups. So if you have like an AA or you have families of cancer terminally ill patients, they can meet using these lunch pool groups that they create. Even if it's like mom groups, so meeting other adults, whatever connects people and whatever groups people can form. It's basically like a meetup, but on a smaller scale where you can have all the people that are in the meetup, but you can pick and choose, two or three at a time to go and actually have a meaningful conversation with
I think that's
over
awesome.
food or drink. Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of these things that I come across, a lot of these business ideas, so simple, but how sophisticated you guys get into detail, so inspiring. How far pushing that to 5 years? What's the bigger picture?
Yeah, so in 5 years, I want to expand that out and start thinking. We've already started testing it a little bit, but start thinking how can we incorporate remote workers? So we're focused on the in-person meeting, but in 5 years, I'm hoping that we'll be able to incorporate video.
That'd
Like
be awesome.
think about FaceTime, and I never FaceTimed until the last few years. But now it's like I have my daughter. We're in Tennessee right now. My mom is in Georgia, and watching grandma, interface over FaceTime with my 2-year-old daughter is amazing. And
Can't imagine.
so, yeah, being able to incorporate that frictionlessly to where we take away the stigma. So right now you see a row of people in a booth or in different booths in a restaurant, and they're all sitting on one side by themselves, scrolling through their feeds. I'd rather it be where they're on Lunchpool, and maybe they couldn't find anybody, but maybe they want to connect with someone across the country. So they set up their phone there, they're video chatting and both eating. Over the next 5 years, we're really looking to incorporate as much technology, but it's making us feel like we're right there with each other and really building those meaningful connections that I think everybody's craving, especially nowadays.
I love it. I love it. I couldn't agree more. Alexander, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I know the listeners will see value. I really enjoyed how you broke down prioritizing and building that self-discipline up as an entrepreneur. Very, very difficult things, but over time, it kind of becomes not second nature, but a little bit easier day by day. But it's time for the last word, Alexander. Is there something that you would like to touch on today that you did not get to share with our listeners yet?
I would say you kind of touched on what I'd like to touch on. It's small bites. So, they say the only way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time, and that's so true. You know, it's look at how big you are, look at how big the thing that you need to do is, and realize that it's not going to all get done right away. And so, whether it be building a business, whether it be chasing your dreams, getting that job, you know, saving up for whatever you want, like a boat or a car, you got to take it day by day, and you got to start small. But if you can break up that huge task into micro events, or you know, the smallest,
I
what's the
love
next
that
step?
micro events. I like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
then
awesome.
then yeah, you do that, and then you'll be well on your way to whatever you want to achieve. So, you know, it's take it one bite at a time.
I love that advice, and I'm sure everybody listening and will appreciate that as well. Well, awesome, Alexander. Can you go ahead and share your social media or your website or just any way for our listeners to follow your endeavors and see when they can get on lunch break?
Sure. So my Instagram is I underscore am underscore able Abell. I am a able. Yeah, it's
Oh,
um,
cool. His last name.
but then also Lunchpool. So Lunchpool is let'slunchpool.com, or on all the social media channels it's also at Let's Lunchpool. So LETS lunch pool, like swimming pool. Um, yeah, and so follow me, and hopefully you can get to be part of the journey.
Absolutely, Alexander. You guys can also follow the show on Instagram at Your Favorite Morning Podcast and on Twitter at Podcasts by Lanci. Of course, my handles are at Vincent A. Lanci on all social media and YouTube, and my website is vincentalanci.com. Be sure to check out my book on Amazon, Left for Dead, A Story of Redemption, and DM me or email me. Let me know what you think. If you enjoyed today's episode, please continue listening and rate What It's Really Like to Be an Entrepreneur 5 stars. I work hard to find value delivering stories for you each week. And as always, I'll follow the last word with a quote that inspired me, and it will be sure to inspire you too. Let us make our future now, and let us make our dreams tomorrow's reality. Thanks for tuning in. What it's really like to be an entrepreneur.